So, hi everyone, welcome back to an episode of Energy Conversations. Today we're at the AMCHAM HSSC conference, and luckily for us, we're joined today by the CEO of AMCHAM Trinidad and Tobago, Nirad Tewarie. So, I just want to jump right into it. So, you have a background in media, international relations, communications. So, can you explain to the public how exactly did you stumble upon the CEO of AMCHAM role?
Well, thanks for having me, first of all. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for participating in the conference. By accident, really. So, I started my career in media when I was 16 years old because I would like to describe myself as a bit of a non-traditional learner. I didn't enjoy school, but I did what I had to do. I did fairly well at CXE, but I didn't want to go into A-levels right away, so I started working at The Guardian. And later I went on to university where I studied communications. I came back, I worked at various media houses here, including TV6. And then I took a little hiatus and I went to the Commonwealth Secretariat in London. In their communications and public affairs department, but it sort of broadened my thinking a little further. And when I came back, we would have started the IETV newsroom. I worked at CL Communications for a while, and then we started IETV. And while there, I decided I figured I need to do something else, and I went on to do a master's in international relations. At the time I was doing the master's, the CARICOM was negotiating our biggest free trade agreement up until this point still with the European Union, the Economic Partnership Agreement. And then I took a little bit of a bend in the road. Mm-hmm. I left. I went to work with Winston Dukaran at the time. He was then leader of the UNC and going to form the COP, or eventually form the COP. And after that, well, I couldn't go back to media because, I'd been tainted, as it were, by the politics. So I did some lecturing along the way and some consulting, and I saw this job being advertised at the Coalition of Services Industries. And one of the things when I started doing research is that the coalitions around the Caribbean had been started to help service providers take advantage of the opportunities as a result of the EPA, in large part, because it's the only trade agreement that we have as CARICOM that has a services chapter, which means access for service companies, so companies who don't produce things, but companies like media companies, but really artists, engineers, architects, musicians, and the like. And so, luckily by then I'd completed my master's and I applied and I was successful. I got that job. I worked there for 5 years, and while I was there, this opportunity at AMCHAM came up, and I was encouraged to throw my hat in the ring. I was a bit reluctant at first, but I did, and I was successful in the interview process, and that's how I'm here.
I'm glad that you kind of wove the bigger picture there for us, because it truly highlights to our audience especially that, there's not necessarily a cookie cutter for everyone or one size fits all. Everybody has their own path, and they, follow your gut on something. If it doesn't feel right, or, if you feel like maybe this isn't for me, let me try to find what is.
No, absolutely. I encourage anyone who comes to me to follow your dreams, follow your instincts, but be sensible and always move forward. Some people have taken journeys like mine, or more so people who have been more successful than I have been, who may not have gone to university, or may not have finished high school, or may not have done this, or may not have done that. And say, well, if they could do it, I could do it too. Yes, of course you could do it too, but understand, one, they are not the norm. So 1,000 people would try to do what they did, and be unsuccessful, and they might be the 1,001. They might be 1 in a million, 1 in 100,000. So first of all, understand that the likelihood of success, if you take what is essentially a harder road, is lower. But secondly, you can't use that just not to do stuff. Because while they were not doing things, those people who were successful, they were doing other things, right? And I think that's a very, very delicate balance, but an important point, because too many people say, well, this person didn't do this and this person didn't do that and they're successful. Why do I have to?
Why I can't do it as
Why can't? Of course you can, but not everybody has that person's talent or opportunities or luck. And therefore, whatever you're doing, keep doing. My advice is, and the best thing about advice is you could ignore it, but at least listen to it and decide why you want to ignore it if you don't want to take it. My advice is always do things that give yourself more options rather than less. So if you're at a point where you could do this and it'll give you 3 options, or you could not do it and you may have 1 or none, then take the one that will give you 3.
Yeah.
And then go along those roads, and then the road, you'll come to another point where you make a decision that will give you different options and you could decide. And the other thing is, you could do something for a time that doesn't have to be where you end. So I started in journalism. I love communications. I miss the media somewhat, but I don't want to go back there now, and I'm doing something totally different. Maybe in 5 years, I'll be doing something else. Who knows?
So I'm glad that it led you to the path of AMCHAM, because AMCHAM plays a pivotal role in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, for our listeners and our viewers, can you just highlight the functionality and the role of AMCHAM today in the business world especially?
Sure. So AMCHAM is a chamber of commerce. A chamber of commerce is an organization that is made up of businesses that would like to create the conditions to do more business, right? They can be regional chambers that really want to look at, say, a city or a borough or a town and work there, and then they could be national, like AMCHAM is. AMCHAM is what you would call a binational chamber, in that we're the American Chamber of Commerce, and so we have a link to the US, but we're not funded by any outside entity, we're not funded by any government, we're not beholden to anyone, we're an NGO with our own bylaws and the like. What I think sets us apart is we are very interested in trade and in an environment, a business environment in which there's a strong adherence to the rule of law. That is, we have laws, we have policies that need to be enforced and implemented to allow business, but also anyone in society, to have economic freedom. That is, the opportunity to be well compensated for the effort that they put in, and the ability to use that compensation to do any number of things in the society, including, as we say flippantly, move up, right? So that if you are working hard and you are deliberate and you're strategic, you shouldn't have impediments that are placed in your way because of corruption or favoritism and the like. So that's primarily what we try to work on, and in the context of trade. So trade with the United States, of course, and that trade is 2 ways. So hopefully investments coming in, as well as companies that wish to export, as well as trade in the Americas primarily.
So I'm glad you highlighted the role there in a broad spectrum, as we would see it. But as our name implies, energy conversations, we'd like to tie it back a bit to the energy industry. So I was in attendance at the ESG conference, and I know you have a strong belief in ESG integration into businesses in Trinidad and Tobago, and not only that, but showcasing how it could be beneficial to businesses, right? So with regards to the integration of policies, businesses, and environmental sustainability within the energy industry, how do you see AMCHAM playing a role to maybe help bridge that gap and align companies on that more sustainable path?
Right. So, I mean, ESG, environmental, social, and governance aspects of business, right? Without a strong governance system, your your company will be weak and it'll be vulnerable to the whims of any individual in an influential position. It'll be vulnerable to corruption. It'll be vulnerable to a number of things. So governance is a core of making sure that the systems within your company are strong and that you operate, now linking it to the S, you operate in such a way that what you're doing is not just about profits but actually benefits society in some way. And society could be your fence line communities, that is the communities around where you operate, or it could be the country or a sub-region of the country. It could be globally, right? And then, of course, the environment is sort of self-explanatory that as far as we could, we should try to operate our businesses at least doing no harm to the environment and hopefully improving the environment. And I say try because it's still something that companies are figuring out. So, for example, when you're in extractive industries such as energy or oil and gas or mining or what have you, these are things that we're still trying to manage. So how can AMCHAM help? Well, a couple of ways. One is through education. So education for big companies and small companies, education by allowing people who are further along their ESG journey to share with others, as well as bringing external resources for companies of any size at any stage to be able to learn and to implement better and better practices so that ideally you get to best practice, right? And that's what we do through the ESG conference and things like that. The other is that, as you said, policies are coming. And there are various schools of thought on policies. Within the United States, for example, there are people who don't want to hear about ESG and there are policymakers who do. In Europe, they've already started to implement some legal requirements around ESG measurement and the impact your business is having using ESG metrics, positive or negative, right? But it's not globally harmonized. There are some IFRS standards, accounting standards, that are that have been developed, but there is no global acceptance of any one set of standards. So eventually, sooner maybe rather than later, Trinidad and Tobago itself will either have to implement some form of reporting standards for our companies to be able to compete internationally or even to comply with local legislation as a result of international treaties that we might sign and the like. And remember, we're small island developing states, and ESG considerations will be more important to us overall than some other countries. So AmCham Trinidad and Tobago can play a role in influencing those policies and then helping companies understand them to be able to comply when they do come into effect.
I'm really glad you touched on these standards there, and I think in all the conversations I've had in a professional setting surrounding ESG, that was a major concern. How are we supposed to implement this if there's no one right way to do it, right? Yeah. I just want to push the conversation a little further. What do you think would be the impact of ESG on our local energy industry?
It depends on what aspect of ESG, but the thinking behind labeling these different components of how you do business ESG is that it should strengthen business, and not just at the individual business level, but at the individual business level as well, but also in the national contexts as well as the international context. So if we can get business operations to a point where, and some people don't believe this is possible, but to a point where we are doing less or no harm or even having a positive impact on the environment overall that's a good thing, because we are in an environmental crisis and we are not sure that human beings will be able to inhabit this planet even in the next 100 years. And so it is something that is hitting us in our face right now, and we have to do something about it. If we have stronger governance processes in businesses, remember, it takes two to be corrupt, right? It takes a business person, and I say business person because not always really a business person, someone, and a government official, not always a politician either. It might be a public servant, right? And so if our governance systems are stronger and we reduce corruption and we have better processes internally, our employees and our management would have better tools to relate to one another, to understand expectations, and to do what they have to do in a clearer environment, which should lead to greater satisfaction and impact. And nationally, hopefully it will reduce corruption and enhance competitiveness, because better run companies that are not that are not corrupt and not facing corruption elsewhere would have hopefully a chance to compete anywhere in the world. And then if businesses have good frameworks and good programs to positively impact society, because no government will ever be able to do everything on its own. I would make the point that business shouldn't be expected to do what governments are supposed to do, but we should be expected to assist and supplement. And if we're doing that effectively, then the whole of society will improve. And if the whole of society improves, then it's better for doing business, it's better for quality of life, not just for the people whose lives have improved, but for those who may have been in a bracket, upper middle class people who may have been in a bracket where they were reasonably comfortable. It should get even more comfortable as we go. So that's how I see ESG impacting going forward, if we embrace what the intent is and we do things to implement.
And at a certain standard as well, right? Definitely. And I just want to bring it home finally. Personally, for me, I've attended the ESG conference. I'm now attending the HSC conference, and I've seen the work that AMCHAM has been doing to not only, let's get up and speak about what's going on, but share knowledge. And I think that is a big, big thing that is needed, not just in the business world, but in the world in general. Share knowledge with your neighbor, share knowledge with your friend, right? And what I would like to applaud you all on is the accessibility of it. It's not like niche where, some conferences, you have to have like a seat. I saw kids coming around and they were making their way and they were learning and interacting. I think that is very, very important for them, especially at this age bracket where they're at that, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? I'm not sure. It kind of shapes their minds. So what do you see as the overall impact of not only this conference, but everything that AMCHAM has done over the past year? And what can we expect from AMCHAM in the upcoming year?
Well, AMCHAM, for our members, we try to create an atmosphere where our members feel like we're family, right? All of the team members take tremendous pride and take it personally if they can't satisfy a member's query or a member's need. It bothers us. And so we always try to make sure that our members feel and know that they could reach out to us for anything. In extreme examples, I always make the point that I've been asked to help get a plane clearance to land in Trinidad and Tobago. So members call us for almost anything, which is good and which is what you want, because then you want your members to know that you are there to serve them. In terms of what we're trying to do, so if there's one area where I feel I would like us to have more of an impact, it is on contributing to the reduction in violent crime somehow, because I think that is the single biggest issue facing us as a country, and it spills over into other things. And of course, dealing with violent crime, make no mistake about it, means dealing with white collar crime and fraud. But if we can play a role in helping to reduce crime, I would feel like we have done the country and our members a tremendous service.
And I think that is a message that resonates across all sectors, not just energy, not just business, but in general. That's something we're faced with every day, and that is something that we should really take a step back and look at, because we want to leave a legacy behind for our children, our children's children, and we want to leave a country behind that they're patriotic to and stand for. So I think that's a really great message to end off things with. Thank you so much for having us today. Thank you so much for participating, and we definitely look forward to collaborating on more projects in the future.
Yes, thank you for having me, Nisha.
Not a
And all the
problem.
best to you and the team at Rams.
Thank you.
Okay.